A cold autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows of the neighborhood grocery store as Daniel Carter stepped inside, pulling the hood of his faded jacket over his head. At 34 years old, life had worn him down far beyond his age. Dark circles rested beneath his tired eyes, and his work boots were still damp from spending the entire morning repairing fences and hauling construction materials for a temporary labor job. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was enough to keep a roof over his daughter Lily's head, most of the time. 7-year-old Lily walked beside him, clutching his rough, calloused hand with one hand while holding a crumpled shopping list in the other. Despite the difficult circumstances they lived in, she wore a bright smile that somehow made every gloomy day feel a little warmer. "Daddy," she whispered as they stopped beside a shopping cart, "Grandma's medicine comes first, remember?" Daniel smiled gently. "It always comes first." He reached into his wallet and counted his money for what felt like the 10th time that afternoon. One 10-pound note, a 5, a 2, a 1-pound coin, and a handful of loose change. Just enough for bread, milk, a small bag of rice, the medicine for his elderly mother, and perhaps a few apples if they were on sale. Every penny had already been planned before they entered the store. "Let's be careful," he said softly. "We can't buy anything that's not on the list." Lily nodded without complaint. She had learned far too early what it meant to live with less. As they made their way down the dairy aisle, an unexpected crash echoed through the store. Everyone turned. An elderly woman stood frozen beside her shopping trolley. A carton of eggs had slipped from her trembling hands and exploded across the polished floor. Several other grocery bags tipped over, spilling fruit and canned food in every direction. "Oh dear," she murmured, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry." Instead of helping, a few shoppers sighed loudly in annoyance. One well-dressed woman rolled her eyes dramatically. "People her age shouldn't be shopping alone," she muttered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Another customer chuckled. Someone pulled out a mobile phone and began recording the embarrassing scene. The elderly woman's cheeks flushed crimson. With arthritic hands that trembled uncontrollably, she slowly knelt, trying to gather the broken shells before anyone slipped. Every movement looked painful, yet she apologized over and over as if the accident had been some terrible crime. Daniel watched silently for only a heartbeat. Then, without saying a word, he handed Lily the shopping basket. "Stay right here, sweetheart." He hurried across the aisle and gently knelt beside the woman. "You don't have to do this alone," he said with a warm smile. The woman looked up, surprised that someone had finally stopped. "I'm afraid I've made quite a mess. We'll clean it together." Ignoring the curious stares around him, Daniel picked up the scattered groceries while a store employee brought over a mop. He helped the woman to her feet before walking back to replace the broken eggs. When the cashier scanned the replacement carton, Daniel quietly placed it beside the woman's groceries. "Oh no," she protested. "Please, I couldn't possibly let you pay." "It's all right," Daniel replied. "Accidents happen. But you don't even know me." He smiled kindly. "I don't have to." The cashier announced the total, and Daniel realized the extra purchase had used nearly all the money left in his wallet. He glanced briefly at his own basket and quietly returned the apples and a loaf of fresh bread to the shelf without saying a word. Lily noticed but remained silent, understanding exactly why. When everything was packed, Daniel carried the elderly woman's heavy bags out into the rain. She looked at him with tears glistening in her eyes. "You remind me of someone I loved very much," she whispered. Daniel simply smiled. "I just hoped that if my own mother ever needed help, someone would stop for her too." Neither he nor Lily noticed the sleek black luxury SUV parked across the street. Inside, a poised woman in an elegant suit had witnessed every moment through the rain-speckled window. She had seen the laughter, the humiliation, and the poor single father who sacrificed part of his family's dinner without expecting so much as a thank you. Her expression slowly changed from curiosity to quiet admiration as she reached for her phone. Keeping her eyes fixed on Daniel as he disappeared into the rain holding his daughter's hand, she gave a calm but unmistakably urgent instruction. Find that man. Daniel never looked back. He had no idea that the woman he had just helped was the mother of one of the most powerful billionaires in the country, or that his simple act of kindness was about to change his life forever. Daniel and Lily walked the 30 minutes back to their small apartment, their coats soaked through by the relentless rain. The plastic grocery bags felt lighter than they should have. Daniel knew exactly why. The money he had spent replacing the elderly woman's groceries meant they would have to stretch what little food remained until his next paycheck. Lily looked up at her father as they crossed a busy street. Daddy. Yes, sweetheart. Are we going to be okay? Daniel forced a reassuring smile, even though worry weighed heavily on his heart. We always find a way. She nodded, believing him completely. That innocent faith was both his greatest comfort and his greatest burden. When they finally reached the aging apartment building, Daniel unlocked the door to their tiny one-bedroom flat. The wallpaper peeled from the corners, the heater rattled noisily whenever it worked, and the kitchen cupboards held little more than rice, pasta, and a few canned vegetables. Still, Lily smiled as though it were the happiest home in the world. I'll help Grandma with her medicine, she said cheerfully. Daniel watched his daughter disappear into the bedroom where his elderly mother rested. He leaned against the kitchen counter, quietly exhaling the exhaustion he had hidden all day. His wallet was empty except for a few coins. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Across the city, however, another story was unfolding. A sleek black SUV pulled through the gates of the Hayes estate, one of the most luxurious properties in the country. The mansion stood atop a hill, surrounded by perfectly trimmed gardens, marble fountains, and a security team that rivaled those of government officials. The elderly woman from the grocery store stepped out of the vehicle. Gone was the image of a helpless old shopper. Waiting at the entrance was her daughter, Victoria Hayes, the billionaire founder and CEO of Hayes Technologies, a global company worth billions. Despite her immense success, Victoria's expression was filled with concern as she hurried to embrace her mother. Are you all right? Victoria asked. Margaret Hayes smiled softly. I am now. Inside the mansion's private office, Victoria replayed the grocery store security footage that her assistant had already obtained. The room fell silent. She watched customers laugh. She watched people walk past without stopping. She watched one woman complain impatiently while another filmed the humiliation on her phone. Then Daniel appeared. Victoria leaned closer to the screen. He never hesitated. He never glanced around to see if anyone was watching. He simply knelt beside her mother as though helping a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. She watched him replace the broken eggs. She noticed him quietly remove food from his own shopping basket after paying for her mother's groceries. Her assistant paused the footage. Should we send him a reward? He asked. Victoria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she replayed the final moments once more. No, she said thoughtfully. If I simply send him money, I'll never know who he truly is. Her assistant looked confused. Victoria continued, most people become kind when they know they're being rewarded. I want to know if this man is genuinely good, or if today was just a lucky moment. Margaret smiled proudly. I've lived long enough to recognize sincerity. Victoria nodded. So have I. But I need proof. She turned toward her head of security. I want everything you can find about him. Within hours, investigators began tracing Daniel Carter's identity using the grocery store's security footage and payment records. Meanwhile, Daniel's evening continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. He cooked a simple dinner of rice and vegetable soup while Lily set the table with careful hands. This soup smells good, Lily said happily. Daniel chuckled. That's because you're hungry. His mother smiled weakly from her chair. You've always shared what little you have, Daniel. Your father would have been proud. Daniel looked away for a moment. I just did what anyone should do. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Most people hadn't stopped. After dinner, Lily climbed onto the worn-out sofa beside him. Daddy? Yes. Do you think the old lady got home safely? Daniel smiled. I hope so. Lily rested her head against his shoulder. I think she was lucky. Daniel kissed the top of her head. No, sweetheart. He looked out the rain-covered window. I think I was lucky to be there when someone needed help. At that very moment, miles away, a file landed on Victoria Hayes's desk. She opened it casually. But as she read Daniel Carter's background, her confident expression slowly disappeared. Her eyes widened. Then she whispered to herself. This can't be. The truth about Daniel's past was far more heartbreaking than she had ever imagined. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victoria Hayes's office, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. She had barely slept. The file on Daniel Carter had remained open on her desk all night, each page revealing another chapter of a life marked by sacrifice, heartbreak, and quiet resilience. She took a slow sip of coffee before opening the report again. At the top was a simple photograph of Daniel, taken years earlier. He looked different then. His shoulders were straighter, his smile brighter, and hope still shone in his eyes. He wasn't always like this, Victoria murmured. Her assistant, Michael, nodded. No, ma'am. She continued reading. Years earlier, Daniel had graduated near the top of his engineering class. Colleagues described him as one of the most promising mechanical engineers in the region. His supervisors expected him to lead major projects before he turned 35. Then he met Emily. The report included a wedding photo that immediately caught Victoria's attention. Daniel and Emily stood hand in hand beneath a canopy of white flowers, laughing as though nothing in the world could ever separate them. They look so happy, Victoria whispered. Michael answered softly, everyone said they were inseparable. For several years, life seemed perfect. Daniel's career flourished, Emily worked as an elementary school teacher, and together they welcomed their daughter, Lily. Friends described them as the family everyone admired. Then everything changed. Emily began feeling unusually tired. At first, she blamed the long hours at school. But weeks later, doctors delivered devastating news. She had an aggressive illness that required immediate treatment. Victoria's fingers tightened around the edge of the report. Page after page listed hospital visits, surgeries, medications, and treatments. Daniel sold his car first. Then his savings disappeared. When that wasn't enough, he refinanced their home. Finally, he sold the house altogether. Every decision had one purpose. To give Emily one more chance. One more treatment. One more tomorrow. But despite every sacrifice, she didn't survive. Victoria closed her eyes. For a long moment, the office remained silent. Michael quietly continued. After his wife's passing, Daniel was offered a promotion that would have doubled his salary. Victoria looked up. He accepted. Michael shook his head. He declined. Why? He said Lily had already lost her mother. He refused to let her lose her father too. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Instead of pursuing promotions that required constant travel, Daniel accepted temporary construction jobs, repair work, warehouse shifts, and anything else that allowed him to be home when Lily finished school. The jobs paid far less. But every evening, he was there. Helping with homework. Cooking dinner. Reading bedtime stories. Attending every school play and every parent meeting. He gave up his career, Victoria whispered. Michael corrected her gently. No, ma'am. He chose his daughter. Those words lingered in Victoria's mind long after the meeting ended. Curious to see the man beyond the paperwork, she decided not to rely solely on reports. Disguised in simple clothing, she drove to Daniel's neighborhood without telling anyone. The small community looked nothing like the luxurious districts she was accustomed to. Children played football in cracked parking lots. Old apartment buildings stood side by side, their paint faded by time. As Victoria walked through the neighborhood, she spotted Daniel carrying a worn toolbox. She stayed at a distance. He stopped outside an elderly neighbor's house where a broken wooden gate hung loosely from its hinges. Without being asked, Daniel knelt and began repairing it. When the grateful homeowner reached into her purse to pay him, he smiled politely and shook his head. "No, Mrs. Jenkins. Just promise me you'll be careful opening it." He packed his tools and continued walking. A few streets later, he noticed an elderly veteran struggling to carry heavy grocery bags. Daniel immediately took the bags and walked him home. Again. No payment. No recognition. Later that afternoon, several neighborhood children gathered around a bicycle with a broken chain. Daniel crouched beside them, patiently fixing it while explaining how the gears worked. The children cheered when the bicycle rolled forward again. One little boy asked, "How much do we owe you?" Daniel laughed. "You already paid me." The boy looked confused. With those smiles, Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. For the first time in years, she found herself questioning everything she believed about success. She had spent her life building a company, negotiating billion-dollar contracts, and surrounding herself with brilliant people. Yet the man she admired most owned almost nothing. As evening approached, Daniel returned home carrying only a loaf of discounted bread and a small bag of vegetables. Lily ran outside the moment she saw him. "Daddy!" She wrapped her arms around him. He lifted her into the air, laughing despite the exhaustion written across his face. Watching from across the street, Victoria realized something remarkable. Daniel wasn't pretending to be kind. He wasn't performing goodness for anyone's approval. Kindness had become part of who he was. That night, Victoria returned to the Hayes estate. Margaret sat quietly in the library, reading beside the fireplace. Without looking up, she smiled. "You found him." Victoria nodded slowly. "I found much more than that." She handed her mother the report. Margaret closed it after only a few pages. "I don't need paperwork to know his heart." Victoria stared into the dancing flames. "I've spent years wondering whether truly selfless people still exist." "And now?" Margaret asked. Victoria smiled faintly. "Now I want to know one thing." "What is that?" She looked directly at her mother. Would Daniel Carter still be exactly the same if he stood face to face with a billionaire? Margaret's gentle smile widened. "There's only one way to find out." The next morning, before sunrise, a sleek black car quietly pulled up outside Daniel's modest apartment building. A confident woman stepped out, dressed not as a billionaire CEO, but as the owner of a small local business. She walked toward Daniel's front door, raised her hand, and knocked. The sharp knock on the apartment door echoed through Daniel Carter's small home just after 7 o'clock the next morning. Daniel frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Lily looked up from the kitchen table where she was finishing her cereal before school. "Daddy, someone's here." "I've got it." He wiped his hands on an old towel and opened the door. Standing outside was a confident woman in a simple navy business suit. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she carried a leather folder instead of the designer handbags she usually wore as the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. Daniel had never seen her before. "Mr. Daniel Carter," she asked politely. "Yes. My name is Victoria Harper." It was the false surname she had chosen to conceal her true identity. "I own a property management company. Someone recommended you for maintenance and repair work." Daniel looked surprised. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person." "I don't believe so." She smiled warmly. "I heard you're honest, hardworking, and capable of fixing almost anything. Daniel chuckled modestly. I do my best. Victoria glanced around the modest apartment. The peeling wallpaper, the worn furniture, and the patched curtains confirmed everything she had read in his file. Yet the home was spotless. Simple. But filled with warmth. I need someone dependable, she continued. The position starts immediately. The pay is much better than temporary construction work. Daniel hesitated. I've never worked for a property management company. That's all right. I also need to leave by 4 every afternoon. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Most applicants ask about salary first. Daniel smiled. My daughter finishes school at 4:30. I promised her I'd always be there when she comes home. Victoria noticed Lily watching quietly from the kitchen. So your schedule is non-negotiable? It is. I made that promise after my wife passed away. For a brief moment, Victoria forgot she was conducting a test. She simply admired the man standing before her. You can leave at 4, she replied. Daniel accepted the offer. Neither of them realized that this ordinary conversation marked the beginning of a remarkable journey. 3 days later, Daniel reported to work at one of Victoria's downtown office buildings. He believed it belonged to a medium-sized property company. In reality, it was one of dozens of buildings owned by Hayes Technologies. Victoria had instructed everyone in senior management to treat Daniel like any other employee. No special treatment. No hints. No one except a handful of executives knew the truth. Daniel threw himself into the job. Within hours, he repaired a leaking pipe that had frustrated employees for weeks. He fixed broken office chairs instead of throwing them away. He organized the maintenance storeroom, labeling every shelf so others could easily find tools and supplies. When a young receptionist struggled to carry several heavy boxes, Daniel immediately stepped in. Allow me. You've already got enough work, she protested. So do you, he replied with a smile. Small moments like these became a daily pattern. He greeted the security guards every morning by name. He thanked the cleaners for keeping the building spotless. He held elevators for strangers instead of rushing inside. The janitorial staff quickly grew fond of him because he never acted as though any task was beneath him. One afternoon, Daniel noticed a new intern sitting alone in the cafeteria. The young man looked embarrassed as several employees laughed quietly after he accidentally spilled coffee over important documents. Daniel walked over with a stack of paper towels. It happens. The intern sighed. I've only been here 3 days. They're already calling me coffee boy. Daniel smiled. My first engineering job. I flooded an entire workshop because I connected the wrong pipe. The intern stared at him. Seriously? Daniel nodded. My supervisor said mistakes teach us faster than success. The young man laughed for the first time that day. Victoria, watching through the cafeteria's security cameras from her office, smiled. He doesn't just fix buildings, she whispered. He repairs people. Weeks passed. Daniel became one of the most respected employees in the building without even realizing it. Whenever something broke, people called Daniel. Whenever someone felt discouraged, they somehow found themselves talking to Daniel. Whenever conflicts arose between co-workers, Daniel calmly helped both sides understand each other. His kindness spread quietly through the office. One evening, Victoria decided the final test had come. She instructed her finance director to prepare a thick envelope containing £50,000 in cash. No note. No identification. The envelope was deliberately left inside a maintenance supply room where Daniel was scheduled to work alone. Hidden cameras recorded everything. Daniel entered the room carrying his toolbox. He immediately noticed the envelope lying on the workbench. He opened it. His eyes widened. Inside was more money than he had earned in several years. For a long moment, he simply stared. Images flashed through his mind. His overdue rent. His mother's medication. Lily's worn school shoes. The unpaid electricity bill. The opportunities that amount of money could give his family. Anyone would understand if he kept it. No one would know. Slowly, Daniel closed the envelope. He walked directly to the building manager's office. "I think someone accidentally left this," he said. The manager looked inside and acted shocked. "You didn't take anything?" Daniel looked confused. "It isn't mine." "But no one saw you." Daniel smiled. "I saw me." The manager could barely speak. Within minutes, Victoria received the call. He returned every pound. She closed her eyes. A deep sense of respect filled her heart. This wasn't honesty born from fear. It was honesty rooted in character. That evening, Victoria stood alone in her office overlooking the city skyline. She thought about every wealthy executive she had ever known. Many possessed extraordinary intelligence. Some possessed incredible ambition. But very few possessed the integrity of the poor maintenance worker who had quietly transformed her company without even trying. She reached for the telephone. "Schedule an emergency company-wide meeting tomorrow morning." Her assistant sounded surprised. "Should I tell everyone what it's about?" Victoria smiled. "No. I want every employee there." She hung up the phone and looked once more at the photograph of Daniel helping her mother in the grocery store. Tomorrow, the secret would finally be revealed. Tomorrow, every person who had overlooked the quiet maintenance worker would discover exactly who he was, and why one simple act of kindness had inspired the biggest decision of Victoria Hayes's career. The next morning, Hayes Technologies buzzed with confusion. An emergency company-wide meeting had been scheduled with less than 24 hours' notice. Thousands of employees from the headquarters gathered in the grand auditorium, while offices around the country joined through a live broadcast. Managers whispered among themselves, trying to guess the reason. "Is the company being sold? Maybe we're getting a new CEO. I heard there's been a major acquisition." No one knew the truth. Daniel Carter sat quietly in the last row, wearing the same clean but well-worn work uniform he wore every day. His toolbox rested beside his chair. He felt completely out of place among executives dressed in expensive suits. He leaned toward the maintenance supervisor sitting beside him. "Do you know what's going on?" The supervisor shrugged. "Not a clue." Daniel's stomach tightened. Had he made a mistake? Had someone complained about his work? Was his temporary job about to end? He thought of Lily, his mother, and the bills waiting at home. Losing this job would mean starting all over again. The lights dimmed. The enormous screen behind the stage lit up with the Hayes Technologies logo. A moment later, the auditorium fell completely silent as Victoria Hayes stepped onto the stage. This time, she wasn't pretending to be Victoria Harper. She wore the confidence of one of the most powerful business leaders in the country. Daniel's eyes widened. His heart skipped a beat. "That's the CEO," someone whispered. Daniel stared in disbelief. The woman who had hired him wasn't a small business owner. She was the billionaire founder of the entire company. Victoria looked across the audience until her eyes met Daniel's. She smiled. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I've called this meeting because I want to tell you a story." The room became perfectly still. She pressed a small remote. The giant screen changed. Grainy security camera footage appeared. Employees watched as an elderly woman accidentally dropped a carton of eggs in a grocery store. The eggs shattered across the floor. The audience watched people walk away. Some laughed. One customer even recorded the scene on a mobile phone. An uncomfortable silence spread through the auditorium. Then Daniel appeared on the screen. He walked toward the elderly woman without hesitation. He helped her gather her groceries. He paid for the broken items. He carried her shopping bags outside into the rain. Victoria paused the video. Does anyone here know this man? Hundreds of heads slowly turned toward Daniel. He wished he could disappear. Victoria continued. The elderly woman in this video is my mother, Margaret Hayes. Gasps echoed throughout the room. My mother has always believed that a person's true character is revealed when they think no one is watching. That afternoon, many people ignored her. Some mocked her. But one man treated her with dignity. She looked directly at Daniel. And he never knew who she was. At that moment, the side doors of the auditorium opened. Margaret Hayes slowly walked onto the stage. The audience rose to their feet. She smiled warmly before stepping down from the stage and walking straight toward Daniel. Daniel quickly stood. Before he could say a word, Margaret wrapped her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. You reminded me that kindness still exists. Daniel's voice trembled. I only did what anyone should have done. Margaret gently shook her head. No. You did what very few people actually do. The audience erupted into applause. Many employees wiped tears from their eyes. Victoria returned to the microphone. After meeting Daniel, I asked my leadership team to quietly observe him. He didn't know he was being watched. He believed he was simply doing his job. We discovered that he treated everyone with respect. He encouraged struggling coworkers. He helped the cleaning staff without being asked. He returned £50,000 that no one would have known if he had kept. She paused. Character cannot be bought. It cannot be taught in a boardroom. And it certainly cannot be measured by wealth. She turned toward Daniel. Mr. Daniel Carter. I have spent my entire career searching for leaders. I finally found one wearing a maintenance uniform. The audience broke into another round of applause. Victoria smiled. Effective immediately, I am creating a new division within Hayes Technologies. It will be called the Hayes Community Foundation, dedicated to helping employees, struggling families, veterans, senior citizens, and children in need. She looked directly at Daniel. And I would be honored if you would become its first executive director. The room exploded with cheers. Daniel stood frozen. He could hardly breathe. Me, he whispered. Victoria nodded. Yes. Because leadership isn't about power. It's about serving others. Before Daniel could answer, another surprise awaited him. The auditorium doors opened once again. Lily came running inside, holding her grandmother's hand. Daddy. Daniel dropped to one knee as Lily threw her arms around his neck. I missed you, she cried. He hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face. I missed you too, sweetheart. Victoria smiled as she watched the reunion. There is one more announcement. She turned toward the audience. In memory of Daniel's late wife, Emily Carter, Hayes Technologies will establish the Emily Carter Hope Scholarship, providing educational support for children who have lost a parent. Daniel covered his face with both hands. For the first time since Emily's passing, he allowed himself to cry without trying to hide it. The audience stood once again, applauding louder than ever before. Several executives who had once overlooked the quiet maintenance worker now looked at him with genuine admiration. Margaret stepped beside Lily and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You must be very proud of your father. Lily smiled through happy tears. I always am. Victoria walked down from the stage and stood before Daniel. She extended her hand. Will you help us build a company where kindness matters as much as success? Daniel looked around the auditorium. He saw strangers smiling. Co-workers clapping. His daughter beaming with pride. He thought about the rainy afternoon in the grocery store. He had never expected anything in return for helping an elderly woman. Yet one simple decision had changed everything. With tears in his eyes, Daniel shook Victoria's hand. "I'd be honored." The auditorium erupted into a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. As father and daughter stood together beneath the bright stage lights, Victoria addressed every employee one final time. "Never judge a person by the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the money they have. The richest heart in this room belonged to the poorest man among us." Daniel looked at Lily, who squeezed his hand and smiled. In that moment, he realized something that no amount of money could ever replace. Kindness given without expecting a reward has a way of returning when you need it most. And sometimes, it changes not only one life, but thousands more.